It was truly heartening to see so many people take an interest in the Israel Gaza war and show that they cared. But now that the conflict has quieted down, so has the internet. But the world hasn't. Conflicts are raging across the globe, and Westerners seem largely ignorant to them, which tells me that social media algorithms play a significant role in how people invest their social and emotional capital. But the algorithm shouldn't determine who is worthy of our attention. So I'd like to bring to light three conflicts happening around the world that you may not know about, but should. These aren't ranked in any way, just listed. They're all important. But before we get started, hit the subscribe button so you can stay up to date and informed about things that matter. Conflict number one, Sudan. In late 2018, Sudan fell into a political crisis that would transform into a full-blown revolution. The brutal military dictator, Omar al-Bashir, was ousted from power mainly by two individuals and their factions, the SAF Sudan Armed Forces and the Janjaweed, which came to be known as the Rapid Support Forces, or RSF. These two forces had once acted as protectors of the dictator Omar al-Bashir, but when protesters didn't back down after months of a brutal crackdown, the two factions decided that Bashir had to go. So, in a move that surprised everyone, they worked together to remove Bashir from power. Afterwards, the people wanted a democratic form of government and didn't trust the SAF and RSF to deliver it. Protests continued in the capital, Khartoum, and the Janjaweeds responded brutally, killing at least 100 protesters and injuring many more. This forced the international community to become involved, including the US. The protesters and SAF reached a power-sharing agreement while they transitioned to a democratic government. But in 2022, the democratic leader was deposed, and SAF leader Abdel Fattah al-Burhan and the leader of the RSF, a man named Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, commonly known as Hemeti, openly took power for themselves. Not long after, the two men fell out with each other over the integration of the Janjaweed into the Sudan Armed Forces, reigniting conflict across the country. The Janjaweed, an Arab militia with control of critical resources like gold and oil, have been able to arm a significant number of men on the ground, while the Sudan Armed Forces, or SAF, have access to sophisticated technology like aircraft, drones, and artillery. In October of 2025, the Janjaweed took the North Darfur capital of El Fasher, consolidating control over much of Darfur. The Janjaweed carried out mass executions of indigenous Darfuri once they took the city, and that is only one region of Sudan. Tens of millions of people are facing acute food insecurity. Disease is rampant, and both sides are committing atrocities. The US has labeled Janjaweed actions in Darfur a genocide. This crisis is ongoing, with all negotiation attempts failing to end the fighting. All the while, the Sudanese people continue to suffer. Conflict number two, Myanmar. In February of 2021, Myanmar's military led a coup of the democratically elected government of Aung San Suu Kyi, leader and state councillor who was the de facto civilian head of state. The military instated a junta and sought to take control of the country. However, the military was immediately opposed by numerous ethnic groups with significant armed forces, resources, and political autonomy themselves. Myanmar is made up of 8 major ethnic groups, but the ethno-lingual diversity of the country actually makes that number much higher, somewhere around 130. Fighting broke out across the country, with the military controlling many urban centers and relying on conventional military arms like air power and artillery. The ethnic armed organizations control their traditional homelands, especially in rural and border areas, relying on unconventional means like ambushes, raids, and IEDs. Lately, the military junta has been losing ground, but they still maintain air superiority. The US and other Western nations impose sanctions on the junta, but have not gotten involved directly. Regional actors are split on their support, with most actors negotiating from a point of realism, trying to keep their economic interests in the country secure and for stability around their shared border. The fighting has killed tens of thousands and has been catastrophic to civilians caught in the middle. Millions are displaced, and humanitarian organizations are struggling to get assistance to those in most need. The war has stalled, with the junta still in control of many urban centers and the ethnic armed militias gaining ground across the country. This conflict seems to have no end in sight. Conflict number 3: Syria. If you look at a map of the Middle East, you won't be able to find Kurdistan, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. The United States has a long history with the Kurds. Most recently, they were our staunch allies in the fight against ISIS. But that is not their only enemy. The Kurds are pressed between a hostile Turkey to the north and the Arab controlled Syrian government in the south. When Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, commonly known as HTS, and allied rebel forces defeated Bashar al-Assad's regime and took over the Syrian government, they sought to revoke the Kurds' semi-autonomy in the north. The Kurds have been semi-autonomous in northern Syria since they defeated ISIS, even establishing their own military and civil institutions. President al-Shara, the new president of Syria, wants Kurdish forces integrated into the country's military, but the Kurds have resisted such a move. President al-Shara also wants infrastructure and critical resources to be controlled by the central government. The Kurds have resisted this as well. The Kurds want to retain their autonomy and seek guarantees that their political and cultural rights will be respected by a government that has made no secret that it is predominantly Arab. However, the conflict is about autonomy and power more than it is about ethnic tensions. Kurdish and Syrian government forces have clashed as government forces pushed into Kurdish controlled areas, gaining control of oil and gas fields, key Kurdish revenue streams. As of now, the two sides have called a ceasefire, but the situation is still tense, and fighting could break out any day. Now let's turn our attention to Syria's south, where another semi autonomous ethnic group had its own conflict with the central government in Damascus: the Druze. The Druze are an ethno religious minority in the south of Syria who clashed with local Bedouin tribes and the government in 2025. The Druze came into conflict with their semi nomadic Bedouin neighbors over land access, security, and authority. When fighting broke out, the government intervened on behalf of the Bedouin tribes. However, the new Syrian government didn't have strict control over its military, and the Druze reported abuse and atrocities at the hands of government forces, claims that Damascus denies. Israel offered aid to the Druze and threatened the new Damascus government if the Druze were not protected, even launching airstrikes right by the presidential palace in Damascus, adding an international element to an already tense Middle East. Tens of thousands were displaced by the fighting and hundreds killed. The fighting has calmed, for now, but the situation remains tense, with many Druze deeply mistrustful of Damascus. These are 3 conflicts you might not know about, but should. The algorithm shouldn't control who and what we care about. Be sure to subscribe and let me know if there's a conflict that you think I should cover next. This is Andrew's Take. See you next time.